In the fog-draped elegance of a Mayfair mansion, a lavish dinner turns deadly when Dr. Maurice Langston collapses, poisoned by a single bite of a raspberry tart. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of secrets. A terrified heiress, a scheming widow, a ruthless financier, a secretive diplomat, and a butler haunted by a tragic past. As blackmail letters and a scandal from 1909 surface, Poirot unravels a chilling truth. Someone at the table turned a festering grudge into murder. Can his little grey cells expose the killer before another secret claims a life? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Mayfair. The late October fog curled through the streets of London like a living thing, cloaking the city in a veil of secrecy that suited Hercule Poirot's mood precisely. In his immaculate flat at Whitehaven Mansions, the diminutive Belgian detective stood before a gilded mirror, adjusting his silk tie with the precision of a jeweller setting a gem. His moustache, a masterpiece of symmetry, gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, betrayed a flicker of anticipation. This was no ordinary evening. On the mahogany table beside him lay an envelope, its creamy paper embossed with the crest of the Darlington family. The invitation within, penned in Lady Beatrice Darlington's elegant hand, requested Poirot's presence at a dinner party at Darlington House, their stately Mayfair residence. The note was courteous but cryptic, alluding to a matter of some delicacy that required his singular expertise. Poirot, ever intrigued by the prospect of a puzzle, had accepted without hesitation. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and chronicler, sprawled in a leather armchair, his boyish face alight with curiosity as he toyed with the invitation. "I say, Poirot, this is rather out of the blue, isn't it? Lady Darlington's not one for theatrics from what I hear. Solid family, old money, no whiff of scandal. What's she want with you?" Poirot turned, his head tilted like a bird considering a particularly interesting crumb. "Mon ami, the absence of scandal in the public eye is no guarantee of tranquility behind closed doors. The Darlingtons are wealthy, yes, and respected. But wealth and respect often conceal the most fascinating secrets. This delicate matter, it intrigues me. We shall discover its nature tonight." At precisely 7 o'clock, Poirot and Hastings alighted from a taxi before Darlington House, a Georgian mansion whose Palladian facade loomed grandly through the mist. The windows glowed with warm light, promising elegance within. The door was opened by Grayson, the butler, a tall, gaunt man with a face as unreadable as a closed book. His eyes, however, flickered with something, nervousness perhaps, as he took their coats and ushered them into the drawing-room. The room was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers, damask wallpaper, and a roaring fire that cast dancing shadows across the gathered guests. Lady Beatrice Darlington, a woman of 50 with the poise of a duchess, greeted Poirot with a smile that was both gracious and guarded. Her auburn hair, streaked with silver, was swept into an elegant chignon, and her blue eyes held a keen intelligence. "Monsieur Poirot, how kind of you to come," she said, her voice low and measured. "I trust that you will find the evening illuminating." Her husband, Sir Reginald Darlington, stood by the fireplace, a glass of sherry in hand. A retired diplomat with a weathered face and a stiff posture, he nodded curtly at Poirot, his expression betraying a trace of unease. "Good of you to join us," he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. The other guests, already sipping aperitifs, were an eclectic assembly, each radiating their own distinct aura. Miss Clara Wentworth, Lady Beatrice's niece, was a delicate young woman of 25, her blonde curls framing a face that seemed perpetually on the verge of tears. Her hands twisted a lace handkerchief, and her eyes darted nervously about the room. Dr. Maurice Langston, a Harley Street physician, exuded an air of professional calm. though his thin lips curled into a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, a widow of indeterminate age, was resplendent in a velvet gown, her laughter bright but edged with calculation. Lastly, Mr. Leonard Bryce, a financier with slicked-back hair and a predatory grin, lounged against a settee, his gaze appraising everyone as if they were stocks on the exchange. As Grayson announced dinner, the party moved to the dining room, a splendid chamber adorned with portraits of Darlington ancestors. The table was set with gleaming silver and Waterford crystal, the centerpiece a cascade of hothouse roses. Poirot, seated between Clara and Mrs. Carver, observed the dynamics with his usual acuity. Sir Reginald's hand trembled slightly as he poured claret from a decanter. Lady Beatrice's smile was fixed, her eyes flitting to her husband with a hint of concern. Clara barely touched her soup, her fork clattering against the porcelain. Mrs. Carver's chatter filled the silences, but her anecdotes carried a barbed edge, particularly when she mentioned Dr. Langston's busy practice. Bryce, meanwhile, spoke little, his attention fixed on Langston with an intensity that Poirot found intriguing. The meal progressed through courses of consommé, roasted pheasant, and delicate asparagus, each dish served with silent efficiency by Grayson and a pair of footmen. The conversation, though polite, crackled with unspoken tension, as if each guest were guarding a secret. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the smallest details. The way Clara flinched when Langston addressed her, the fleeting smirk Bryce directed at Sir Reginald, the way Lady Beatrice's fingers tightened around her wine-glass. It was during the dessert course, a sumptuous raspberry tart adorned with whipped cream, that the evening took its fatal turn. Dr. Langston, who had been recounting a banal anecdote about a medical conference, suddenly paused mid-sentence. His face contorted, his hand flew to his throat, and with a strangled gasp, he slumped forward, his head striking the table with a sickening thud. The room erupted in chaos. Mrs. Carver screamed, Clara froze, and Sir Reginald leapt to his feet, barking for Grayson. Lady Beatrice, pale but composed, called for calm, but her voice trembled. Poirot, his calm unshaken, knelt beside Langston, his fingers deftly checking for a pulse. There was none. A faint acrid scent lingered on the doctor's lips. Bitter almonds, unmistakable. Cyanide, Poirot murmured, his voice low but firm. He rose, his eyes sweeping the room, taking in the shocked faces, the overturned chair, the untouched tarts on every plate but Langston's. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his tone cutting through the panic. This is no accident, this is murder. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The dining room of Darlington House, moments ago a stage for civilized discourse, had transformed into a frozen tableau of horror. Dr. Maurice Langston lay slumped across the table, his lifeless hand still clutching the edge of a dessert plate. The remnants of a raspberry tart scattered like crimson stains on the pristine tablecloth. The air, thick with the lingering aroma of roasted pheasant and claret, now carried a sharper note, the acrid tang of fear. Hercule Poirot stood beside the body, his small frame radiating authority, his green eyes darting with the precision of a hawk. The other guests, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and veiled guilt, remained rooted in place, as if the weight of the moment had pinned them to their chairs. Lady Beatrice Darlington, her composure strained but intact, was the first to act. "Grayson!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Lock the doors at once. No one is to leave this room until the police arrive." The butler, his gaunt face paler than usual, nodded and moved with mechanical efficiency to secure the exits. Clara Wentworth, her delicate features crumpled in distress, clutched her napkin as if it were a lifeline, her eyes fixed on the floor. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, her earlier vivacity replaced by a theatrical display of horror, pressed a handkerchief to her lips, though Poirot noted her eyes were dry. Mr. Leonard Bryce, the financier, leaned back in his chair, his sly smile replaced by a guarded frown. Sir Reginald Darlington, his diplomatic reserve shattered, paced near the fireplace muttering, "This is madness, utter madness." Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered at Poirot's side, his honest face creased with concern. "Good heavens, Poirot! Cyanide! In a tart! How could it have been done right under our noses?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Patience, mon ami. The how is clear, the why, and the who, those are the questions that demand our little grey cells." He knelt again beside Langston, examining the scene with meticulous care. The tart, half eaten, bore no obvious signs of tampering, but the faint bitter almond scent confirmed his diagnosis. His gaze fell to the floor, where a small glass vial, no larger than a thimble, lay partially concealed beneath the table's edge. With a deft movement, Poirot retrieved it using his handkerchief, noting its lack of a label. "Curieux," he murmured. "This vial, it is the key, but it tells us nothing yet." The distant wail of a police siren broke the tension, and soon Inspector Japp strode into the room, his familiar blend of gruff professionalism and weary resignation evident as he spotted Poirot. Well, if it isn't Hercule Poirot, right in the thick of it again," Japp said, his moustache bristling. "Poison, you say? Cyanide. Nasty business. Let's have the facts, then." Poirot inclined his head. "The facts, Inspector, are thus. Dr. Maurice Langston, a guest at this dinner, collapsed during dessert. The symptoms, convulsions, the scent of bitter almonds, point to cyanide poisoning. The poison was likely in the tart, as no other guest shows signs of distress. The vial I have found suggests it was administered here, in this room." Japp's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the guests, each of whom shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "Right then. Nobody moves until we've got statements. Poirot, any ideas on how the blighter got the poison into just one tart?" "That, Inspector, requires order and method," Poirot replied. He turned to the table, his gaze methodical. The dessert plates, each adorned with an identical tart, remained untouched by the other guests, their cream and raspberries glistening innocently. Only Langston's plate showed signs of consumption. Poirot addressed Grayson, who stood rigidly by the door. "Monsieur Grayson, who prepared and served the tarts?" The butler's voice was steady, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor. "The tarts were prepared by the cook, Mrs. Hargreaves, sir. I placed them on the table myself, one for each guest, just before the dessert course. No one else handled them." "And you are certain no one approached the table after the tarts were served?" Poirot pressed, his eyes boring into Grayson's. "Quite certain, sir," Grayson replied, though his gaze flickered briefly to the floor. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madam, did anyone leave the table during the meal, perhaps before the dessert?" Lady Beatrice's brow furrowed, but her voice remained firm. "No, Monsieur Poirot. We were all seated throughout. The conversation was lively. No one had the opportunity to tamper with anything. Yet tamper someone did," Poirot said softly, almost to himself. He began questioning the guests, his tone polite but relentless, like a surgeon probing for the source of a wound. Sir Reginald, still pacing, admitted to no particular grievance with Langston, though his flushed cheeks suggested discomfort. "He was a decent chap, I suppose," Sir Reginald muttered. "Knew him from my Foreign Office days. Never thought he'd end up like this." Clara Wentworth, when questioned, could barely meet Poirot's eyes. I didn't know Dr. Langston well," she stammered, her fingers twisting her handkerchief into knots. "He was kind, I think, but I had no reason to do anything." Her voice broke, and she fell silent, her pale face a mask of fear. Mrs. Carver, recovering her poise, dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief, though Poirot noted the absence of tears. "It's simply dreadful," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Maurice was such a charming man, always so discreet. Who could do such a thing?" Her eyes, however, darted toward Bryce, a fleeting glance that Poirot filed away. Leonard Bryce, when questioned, leaned forward, his tone cool. "Langston and I had business dealings, nothing more. A shame he's gone, but I've no idea who'd want him dead." His smile was too smooth, his nonchalance too studied, and Poirot's instincts prickled. As Japp's constables began their work, dusting for fingerprints and cataloguing the scene, Poirot stepped back, his mind a whirl of observations. The vial, the tart, the locked room, the guests' evasions, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed, and the murderer is likely among us. I, Hercule Poirot, will not rest until the truth is revealed. You will all remain available for further questions, n'est-ce pas?" The guests nodded, some reluctantly, others with nervous haste. Japp, scribbling in his notebook, muttered, "This lot's hiding something, Poirot. I can feel it." "Oui, Inspector," Poirot replied, his eyes glinting. "And it is the task of the little grey cells to uncover what it is. The method, it was precise. The motive, it is hidden, but we shall find it." As the police escorted the guests to the drawing-room for further statements, Poirot lingered, his gaze returning to the vial in his handkerchief. It was small, unremarkable, yet it held the secret of Langston's death. "Who brought you here?" he whispered to it, as if it could answer. "And why only for him?" Hastings, watching his friend, shook his head. "You're already miles ahead, aren't you, Poirot? I can't make head or tail of it." Poirot smiled faintly. "The head and the tail, mon ami. They are both here, in this room. We have only to find the thread that connects them." The fog outside Darlington House thickened, wrapping the mansion in a cocoon of mystery. Within, the stage was set, the players assembled, and Hercule Poirot's mind was already weaving the strands of evidence into a tapestry of truth. The game had begun. Chapter 3. The Doctor's Secrets. The morning after the grim events at Darlington House, London awoke to a sky scrubbed clean by a brisk autumn wind, though the chill in the air seemed to carry the shadow of the previous night's tragedy. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped out of a taxi in Harley Street, his expression one of quiet determination. Beside him, Captain Hastings adjusted his scarf, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. "I say, Poirot, this business with Langston is positively ghastly. Do you really think we'll find answers in his office?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Mon ami, the office of a man like Dr. Maurice Langston is a vault of secrets. A physician, especially one of his repute, knows the frailties of his patients, both physical and moral. If we are to understand why he was poisoned, we must uncover what he knew." The Harley Street practice was housed in a discreet Georgian building, its brass plaque gleaming with understated authority. The door was opened by Miss Norton, Langston's secretary, a woman in her late 30s with a pinched face and spectacles that magnified her wary eyes. Her morning attire was impeccable, but her hands betrayed a nervous flutter as she ushered them into the waiting room. "This is a terrible shock, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low. "Dr. Langston was a brilliant man. Who could have done such a thing?" "That, mademoiselle, is what I intend to discover," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but probing. "May we see his office?" Miss Norton hesitated, then led them to a spacious room lined with mahogany bookshelves and a desk piled with medical journals. A faint scent of antiseptic lingered, mingling with the musty aroma of leather-bound ledgers. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the locked cabinet, the neatly arranged instruments, and a photograph of Langston shaking hands with a distinguished-looking man, Sir Reginald Darlington, years younger, at what appeared to be a diplomatic function. "Miss Norton," Poirot began, settling into a chair with the air of a man who had all the time in the world. Dr. Langston. He was a busy man, no? Many patients, many responsibilities. Did he seem troubled in recent weeks? The secretary's lips tightened. He was preoccupied, perhaps. More so than usual. He cancelled several appointments last week, which was unlike him. He said he had personal matters to attend to. Personal matters? Poirot echoed, his moustache twitching. And did he confide in you about these matters? No, sir, she replied too quickly. He was a private man. Hastings, leaning against the desk, raised an eyebrow. Come now, Miss Norton. You must have noticed something. A man doesn't just get poisoned out of the blue. Miss Norton's eyes darted to the floor, then back to Poirot. There were letters, anonymous ones. They arrived in plain envelopes, no return address. He burned them after reading, but I saw him once, pale as a ghost, muttering about damned vipers. Poirot's interest sharpened. And these letters, you did not see their contents? She shook her head. He kept them in that drawer, she said, pointing to a locked compartment in the desk. He was careful to lock it when I was around. With a nod, Poirot produced a small paperclip from his pocket, his fingers moving with the dexterity of a watchmaker. In moments the drawer yielded, revealing a bundle of papers tied with string. Among them were 3 letters, their edges singed as if someone had considered destroying them. The handwriting was jagged, the tone menacing, pay what you owe, or the truth about '09 will be known to all. Another read, your silence is expensive, Doctor, $5,000 by month's end, or your reputation is finished. Blackmail, Hastings whispered, his eyes wide. Langston was being squeezed, and hard. Oui, Poirot murmured, slipping the letters into his pocket. But for what secret? The year '09. What happened then? He turned to Miss Norton. You have worked for Dr. Langston long, mademoiselle. 10 years, she replied, her voice steadying. Since 1915. Then you would know of any irregularities from 1909? Her face closed like a shutter. I wasn't here then. I know nothing of it. Poirot's smile was polite but unconvinced. His attention shifted to a ledger on the desk, Langston's appointment book. Flipping through its pages, he noted frequent visits from Sir Reginald Darlington, marked as consultations, though no ailment was specified. More surprising were entries for Mrs. Evelyn Carver, who had visited weekly for the past month, always late in the evening. Curieux, Poirot said softly. Mrs. Carver, she is not ill, yet she seeks the doctor so often. He continued his search, his fingers pausing on a prescription pad. One slip, dated 2 weeks prior, authorized a small quantity of potassium cyanide for a patient with a heart condition. A rare but legitimate use. The vial matched the one Poirot had found under the dining table, though its label had been removed. The poison, it came from here, he said, holding up the slip. But how did it travel to Darlington House? Miss Norton paled. I don't know, sir. Dr. Langston was meticulous with his medications. He kept them locked in that cabinet. She pointed to a metal case in the corner, its lock intact. Poirot examined the cabinet, finding it secure, but noting faint scratches around the keyhole, as if it had been tampered with. Someone with skill or access took the cyanide, he said. We must learn who. As they left the office, Hastings shook his head. Blackmail, stolen poison, secret appointments. This is a tangled mess, Poirot. Where do we go from here? To Darlington House, mon ami. Oh, Poirot replied, hailing a taxi. We must speak with Sir Reginald. His name appears too often in Langston's affairs. At Darlington House, the atmosphere was heavy with unease. Grayson admitted them, his expression as unreadable as ever, though Poirot noted a slight stiffness in his posture. Sir Reginald received them in his study, a dimly lit room lined with diplomatic mementos. His face, lined with fatigue, betrayed irritation at their arrival. Monsieur Poirot, I've told you all I know. Langston was an acquaintance, nothing more. Poirot's eyes were unrelenting. Yet you visited him often, Sir Reginald. Your name fills his appointment book. What was the nature of these visits? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Personal matters. A diplomat's life leaves complications. Langston was discreet, that's all I'll say. And these complications, Poirot pressed, they would not perhaps relate to the year 1909. The colour drained from Sir Reginald's face, but he recovered quickly. You're fishing, Poirot. I've nothing to hide. Lady Beatrice, entering the study, overheard the exchange. Her expression was one of controlled alarm. Monsieur Poirot, Maurice Langston was a friend to this family, but he had a talent for collecting others' confidences. If he was blackmailed, it was because he knew too much. About whom, madam? Poirot asked, his voice soft but insistent. Her eyes met his, steady but guarded. About many, I suspect, but you'll find no answers here. As they left, Poirot's mind churned. The letters, the cyanide, Sir Reginald's evasions and Lady Beatrice's cryptic warning formed a web of intrigue. The secret of 1909, he said to Hastings, it is the key. We must unravel it before another pays the price. The taxi rolled through London streets, the city's pulse a backdrop to Poirot's relentless thoughts. The doctor's secrets were many, but one held the truth behind his murder. Hercule Poirot would find it. Chapter 4. The Widow's Tale. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across London streets as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to Belgravia, where Mrs. Evelyn Carver resided in a stylish flat that spoke of wealth and a penchant for ostentation. The widow's home, with its velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, and vases overflowing with exotic flowers, was a stark contrast to the austere professionalism of Dr. Langston's office. Poirot, his cane tapping lightly on the parquet floor, surveyed the room with a discerning eye, noting the careful arrangement of every detail. A stage set for a woman who thrived on attention. Mrs. Carver greeted them in a black silk dress that clung to her still youthful figure. Her dark hair swept into an elaborate chignon. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a mind accustomed to weighing every word. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how delightful, she purred, gesturing to a pair of plush armchairs. Though I confess, I'm devastated by poor Maurice's death. Such a tragedy. Her voice trembled, but Poirot observed that her hands, adorned with glittering rings, remained steady as she poured tea from a silver pot. Madame Carver, Poirot began, his tone courteous but unyielding. Your grief is noted, but I am here to uncover the truth. Dr. Langston was poisoned, and you, I understand, were a frequent visitor to his office. Why? Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. Oh, merely health concerns. A woman of my age. Well, one must be vigilant. Maurice was so very discreet, you know, the perfect physician. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of skepticism. Discreet, oui, but also perhaps too curious about the affairs of others. His appointment book shows you visited him weekly, late in the evening. These were not ordinary consultations, I think. Mrs. Carver's laugh was light, almost musical, but it rang hollow. You make it sound so sinister, Monsieur Poirot. I assure you, my visits were quite mundane. A touch of insomnia, a nervous complaint, nothing more. Hastings, less patient, leaned forward. Come now, Mrs. Carver, you must know something. Langston was being blackmailed, and you were at that dinner. Did you see anything odd? Anyone near his plate? Her eyes flickered, and she sipped her tea, buying time. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, she said at last. We were all eating, talking. Clara was terribly quiet, though, now I think of it. She looked positively ill when the tarts were served. Poirot seized on this. Mademoiselle Wentworth, you say? And why, madame? Do you mention her? What do you know of her connection to Dr. Langston? Mrs. Carver leaned back, her expression one of calculated innocence. Only what one hears in drawing-rooms, Monsieur Poirot. Clara's a sweet girl, but there was talk years ago about a broken engagement. Something scandalous, though no one knows the details. Langston, being the family doctor, might have known more than he should. Clara was terrified of him, I could tell. You should ask her why. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he pressed on another front. And you, madame, what of your own dealings with Langston? There are rumours, forgive my bluntness, of a scandal in his past. Something about a falsified death certificate, perhaps in 1909. You are a woman who hears much. What have you heard? Her smile tightened, and for the first time a flash of unease crossed her face. You're well informed, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, there were whispers about Maurice years ago. Something about a patient who died under questionable circumstances. A certificate signed too hastily, perhaps. But it was all hushed up. He was never charged, and he rebuilt his practice. People forget, you know, when a man is charming and useful. Useful? Poirot echoed, his voice soft but piercing. To whom, madame? To you, perhaps in keeping your own secrets? Mrs. Carver's laugh was sharper now, edged with defiance. My secrets, Monsieur Poirot, are hardly worth killing for. I'm a widow with a comfortable income and a taste for good company. Maurice was a friend, nothing more. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. Merci, Madame Carver. You have been most illuminating. But I warn you, the truth has a way of surfacing, like a bubble in still water. As they left the flat, Hastings shook his head. She's hiding something, Poirot. All that charm, it's a mask. And what's this about Clara? Do you think she's mixed up in this? Clara Wentworth is a piece of the puzzle, mon ami, Poirot replied, his eyes distant. But so is Mrs. Carver. Her gossip is a weapon, and she wields it with precision. We must see Mademoiselle Wentworth next. They found Clara at Darlington House, in the conservatory, surrounded by ferns and the faint scent of damp earth. She was pale, her hands trembling as she tended to a potted orchid. When Poirot and Hastings entered, she started, nearly dropping her watering can. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I didn't expect you. Mademoiselle, Poirot said gently, I must speak plainly. Mrs. Carver suggests you feared Dr. Langston. She speaks of a broken engagement, a secret he held over you. Is this true? Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she sank onto a wicker chair. It's true, she whispered. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a man, Henry Vane. It ended because I was foolish. I trusted someone I shouldn't have, and there was a misunderstanding. Maurice, Dr. Langston found out. He treated Henry's family, you see, and he learned the details. Last month he threatened to tell everyone unless I paid him $2,000. I don't have that kind of money. Did you pay him anything? Poirot asked, his gaze steady. No, she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't. I told him I'd go to my aunt, Lady Beatrice, but he laughed and said she'd never believe me over him. I was so afraid, but I swear I didn't kill him. Hastings, moved by her distress, patted her shoulder awkwardly. There, Miss Wentworth. We believe you, don't we, Poirot? Poirot's expression was unreadable. Mademoiselle, your honesty is noted. But tell me, did you see anyone near Dr. Langston's plate during dinner? Clara shook her head. I was too nervous to notice much. Grayson served the tarts, and we were all talking. I don't know. As they left the conservatory, Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of connections. The blackmail. It is the thread that binds this case, he said to Hastings. Langston preyed on secrets. Clara's, perhaps Sir Reginald's, possibly others. But who turned his own weapon against him? Hastings frowned. Mrs. Carver's too glib, Poirot. She knows more than she's letting on. And Clara, poor girl, she's terrified, but I don't see her as a murderer. Nor I, Poirot said, his voice low. But someone at that table had the means and the motive. We must look closer at the others, Bryce, Sir Reginald, even Grayson. The truth lies in their secrets. and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover them." The Belgravia streets were quiet as they walked, the city's pulse a steady rhythm beneath Poirot's relentless thoughts. Mrs. Carver's words, Clara's tears, and the spectre of 1909 loomed large, each a clue in the intricate dance of murder. Chapter 5. The Financier's Game. The city of London, with its labyrinth of stone and glass, pulsed with the relentless energy of commerce as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings navigated its crowded streets. Their destination was the office of Mr. Leonard Bryce, the financier whose sharp smile and guarded demeanour at Darlington House had piqued Poirot's interest. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of coal smoke, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of Dr. Maurice Langton's murder, the blackmail letters, Clara Wentworth's tearful confession, and Mrs. Carver's calculated gossip had woven a complex web. And Bryce, Poirot suspected, was a key thread. Bryce's office occupied the top floor of a sleek modern building in Threadneedle Street, its polished marble and brass fittings a testament to his success. The air inside was heavy with the scent of cigar smoke and ambition. Bryce, seated behind a vast mahogany desk, greeted them with a nod, his dark eyes assessing. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice smooth as polished steel. "I expected you'd come sniffing around. What's this about Langton? A bad business, but I've no part in it." Poirot settled into a chair, his small frame radiating quiet authority. "Monsieur Bryce, you were at the dinner where Dr. Langton met his end. You had dealings with him, no? Business dealings, perhaps not entirely amicable. I wish to understand their nature." Bryce leaned back, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Straight to the point, eh? Very well. Langton and I had an investment venture, pharmaceuticals, a promising startup. He put in a tidy sum, but it went south. Bad decisions, mostly his. I warned him to pull out, but he was stubborn, cost him a fortune." Hastings, standing by a window overlooking the bustling street, frowned. "A fortune he couldn't afford, I take it. Sounds like a motive to me." Bryce's smirk widened, but his eyes were cold. "Motive? For murder? You're barking up the wrong tree, Captain. Langton's loss was his own doing. I didn't shed a tear when he keeled over, but I didn't slip cyanide into his dessert either." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "And yet, monsieur, your name appears in his financial records. A loan, unsecured, for 10,000 thalers. You demanded repayment, did you not? With threats of legal action?" Bryce's composure flickered, his fingers tightening around a silver pen. "You've been digging, haven't you? Yes, I lent him the money, foolishly, I admit. He was desperate, said he needed it to settle a debt. I pressed him to repay when he started dodging me. But kill him? That's absurd. A dead man pays no debts." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. His eyes wandered to a photograph on Bryce's desk, a yacht, gleaming under a Mediterranean sun, with Bryce and Langton aboard, both smiling, glasses raised. "You were friends once," Poirot observed. "This photograph, it tells a story of camaraderie. What changed?" Bryce's expression hardened. "People change, Poirot. Langton got greedy, thought he could play the market like I do. He was out of his depth. We hadn't been close for years." "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "And yet you dined together at Darlington House. A coincidence, perhaps?" Bryce shrugged. "Lady Beatrice invited me. I'm a business associate of Sir Reginald's. No mystery there." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and paced the room, his cane tapping softly. "Monsieur Bryce, you are a man who plays to win. Langton's debt, it was a threat to your reputation, no? A financier who lends unwisely, such a thing could damage you. And then there is the matter of 1909. A scandal, perhaps, that Langton knew of?" Bryce's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "You're fishing, Poirot." I know nothing about 1909, and Langston never mentioned it. If he was tangled up in something, it wasn't with me." As they left the office, Hastings shook his head. "He's slippery, Poirot. That loan business doesn't sit right. And that photograph, why keep it if they weren't friends anymore?" "Precisely, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes glinting. "The photograph, it is a clue to a past not entirely severed. Bryce is a man who guards his secrets, but he is not our murderer. Not yet. We must verify his story." Their next stop was Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp, buried in paperwork, greeted them with a weary grin. "Poirot, you're turning this case into a three-ring circus. What have you got now?" Poirot produced the financial records obtained from Langston's office, courtesy of Japp's earlier efforts. "These documents, Inspector, confirm a loan from Monsieur Bryce to Dr. Langston, dated 6 months ago. Bryce claims it was for a debt, but I suspect there is more. Can your men investigate Bryce's financial dealings with Langston further?" Japp scribbled a note. "I'll put my best on it. Anything else?" "Oui," Poirot said. "The year 1909. Mrs. Carver mentioned a scandal involving Langston, a falsified death certificate. Can you search for records of such an event?" Japp groaned. 16 years ago. That's a tall order, but I'll see what we can dig up. Meanwhile, what about the others that Wentworth? Girl looked scared out of her wits, and Sir Reginald's dodging questions like a politician." Poirot nodded. "All are pieces of the puzzle, Inspector, but the picture, it begins to form. The blackmail, the loan, the scandal of 1909, they are connected, and the connection lies in what Langston knew." Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat in his armchair, a tisane steaming beside him, his eyes half closed as his mind worked. Hastings, pacing, broke the silence. "Poirot, this is getting murkier by the minute. Bryce had reason to resent Langston, but so did Clara, and maybe Sir Reginald. And what about that butler, Grayson? He was right there when the tarts were served." Poirot opened his eyes, a faint smile playing on his lips. "The butler, oui. He is a shadow in this affair, always present yet unseen, but let us consider the method, Hastings. The cyanide was in the tart, placed with precision. Bryce, he is cunning, but his hands were not near Langston's plate. Clara, she was too nervous to act so boldly. Sir Reginald, he is distracted, not devious. Grayson, however, he served the tarts. We must not forget him." Hastings frowned. "But what's the motive, Poirot? Money? Revenge? That 1909 business?" "All of these, perhaps," Poirot said. "Langston was a spider, mon ami, weaving a web of secrets. Someone cut the thread to save themselves. We must find the secret that cost him his life." As the evening drew in, Poirot's thoughts returned to the dining room at Darlington House. The locked doors, the untouched tarts, the vial under the table. Each clue was a note in a symphony of deceit, and Hercule Poirot was determined to conduct it to its final chord. Chapter 6. The Little Grey Cells. The twilight settled over London, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple, as Hercule Poirot sat in his Whitehaven Mansions flat, the glow of a single lamp illuminating his meticulous surroundings. The room, with its polished surfaces and symmetrical furnishings, mirrored the order of his mind. A steaming tisane sat untouched on the side table, its delicate aroma lost on Poirot, whose thoughts were consumed by the labyrinthine puzzle of Dr. Maurice Langston's murder. Captain Hastings, restless as ever, paced the room, his footsteps muffled by the thick Aubusson rug. "I say, Poirot, this case is a proper tangle," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Blackmail letters, a dodgy loan, that 1909 scandal. How do you make sense of it all?" Poirot's eyes, half closed, gleamed with the intensity of a cat watching its prey. "Mon ami, it is not the tangle that matters, but the threads. Each clue, the vial, the tart, the secrets of the guests, forms a pattern. The little grey cells, They are arranging these threads into order. Patience, Hastings. The truth, it will reveal itself. He rose, his movements precise, and began to pace, his cane tapping rhythmically. Let us review. Methodically, the cyanide was in Dr. Langston's tart, placed with precision during the dinner. The vial, found beneath the table, matches one from his own office. The blackmail letters point to a secret from 1909, a scandal that threatens reputations. Clara Wentworth, she is blackmailed for a youthful indiscretion. Sir Reginald, he hides a personal matter. Mrs. Carver, she knows too much and says too little. Mr. Bryce, he is entangled in a financial dispute. And Grayson, the butler, he serves the tarts and sees all. Who, among them, had the means, the motive, and the opportunity? Hastings stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. Grayson's the one who served the tarts, Poirot. He could have slipped the poison in without anyone noticing. But why? What's his grudge against Langston? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind's acceleration. A question most pertinent, Hastings. Grayson is unobtrusive, yet he is always there, watching, listening. A butler knows the secrets of a house. We must explore his past. But first, I propose a gathering, a reconstruction, if you will, to unsettle the guilty. The next evening, Darlington House was once again the stage for Poirot's inquiry. The dining room, its grandeur now tinged with unease, hosted the same guests, summoned at Poirot's request. Lady Beatrice, her face a mask of strained hospitality, greeted them with a nod. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Clara Wentworth sat rigidly, her fingers twisting a pearl bracelet. Mrs. Carver, in a burgundy gown, offered a brittle smile, her gaze darting between the others. Leonard Bryce lounged in his chair, his casual demeanour a thin veneer over tension. Grayson, silent and composed, stood by the door, his presence almost ghostly. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small stature commanding the room. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and deliberate. We are here to unravel the mystery of Dr. Maurice Langston's death. A murder was committed in this room, under our very noses, with a poison so swift it left no chance for mercy. The murderer is among us, and I, Hercule Poirot, will reveal them. A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. Let us consider the facts. The cyanide was in the tart, yet only Dr. Langston's was poisoned. The vial found beneath his chair suggests a sleight of hand, a moment of distraction. Who had such a moment? Lady Beatrice, you presided over the dinner with Grace, but your attention was on your guests, not the plates. Sir Reginald, you poured the wine, but your hands were occupied. Miss Wentworth, your fear of Langston was evident, yet you lacked the composure to act so boldly. Mrs. Carver, your gossip is sharp, but you had no access to the cyanide. Mr. Bryce, your dispute with Langston was financial, yet you sat too far to tamper with his plate. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on each, a hunk-ribbed face. But there is one who moved among us, unseen yet ever present. Grayson, the butler. Grayson's head jerked up, his stoic mask cracking for an instant. Sir, I protest, Poirot continued, undeterred. You served the tarts, Monsieur Grayson. You had access to the kitchen, where the cyanide, stolen from Langston's own office, could have been concealed. You knew his habits, his place at the table. And you had a motive, did you not? A secret, perhaps, tied to the year 1909. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Grayson's face paled, but he said nothing. Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, and Sir Reginald's hands clenched. Clara let out a small gasp, while Mrs. Carver's smile vanished. Bryce leaned forward, his interest piqued. Poirot pressed on. The blackmail letters in Langston's office spoke of 1909, a scandal involving a falsified death certificate. I have learned, through Inspector Japp's inquiries, that in that year a young woman died under Langston's care. Suspiciously, some said. The certificate was signed too quickly, the case closed too neatly. Grayson, you had a sister, did you not? A sister who died in 1909, under Langston's treatment. Grayson's composure shattered. His voice, when he spoke, was low and hoarse. You're mistaken, sir. I served the tarts, yes, but I had no reason to harm Dr. Langston. My sister, her death was an accident. I've nothing to do with this. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. We shall see, Monsieur Grayson. The truth, it cannot hide forever. As the guests dispersed, shaken by Poirot's accusations, Hastings whispered, You're sure about Grayson, Poirot? He's shaken, but he didn't confess. Not yet, mon ami, Poirot replied, his gaze distant. But the seed is planted. The guilty, they will betray themselves. We must watch closely. Back at his flat, Poirot sat in silence, his fingers steepled. The clues, the vial, the letters, the secrets of 1909 were aligning, but one piece eluded him. The motive, Hastings, he said at last. It is not just money or fear. It is personal, a wound deep and old. Tomorrow, we confirm Grayson's story, and then the final act. Hastings shook his head, marvelling. Your little grey cells, Poirot. They never stop, do they? Poirot smiled faintly. Never, mon ami. They are my weapon, and with them I shall bring order to this chaos. The night deepened, and Darlington House stood silent, its secrets locked within its walls. But Hercule Poirot, with his relentless mind, was closing in on the truth, one careful step at a time. Chapter 7. The Butler's Confession. The morning sun pierced the lingering London fog, casting a pale light through the tall windows of Darlington House, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings returned to the scene of the crime. The grand mansion, still heavy with the weight of Dr. Maurice Langston's murder, seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating the final unravelling of its secrets. Poirot, his black patent shoes gleaming, walked with a purposeful stride, his eyes bright with the clarity of a man who saw the end of the puzzle. Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his hat, his expression a mix of anticipation and unease. I say, Poirot, you're awfully sure of yourself today, he remarked. Do you really think Grayson will crack? Poirot's moustache curved slightly, a rare smile. Mon ami, the guilty, they are like a tightly wound spring. Apply the right pressure, and they unravel. Today, we apply that pressure. The drawing room, where the guests had gathered 2 nights prior, was now a stage for Poirot's denouement. Lady Beatrice Darlington stood by the mantel, her face a study in controlled anxiety, her fingers tracing the edge of a porcelain figurine. Sir Reginald, seated in a high-backed chair, stared into the fire, his hands gripping the armrests. Clara Wentworth perched on a settee, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute, as if bracing for a storm. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, her usual vivacity subdued, sat with a forced smile, her gaze flickering towards the door. Leonard Bryce leaned against a bookcase, his casual posture belied by the tension in his jaw. Grayson, the butler, stood by the entrance, his gaunt face impassive, but his eyes betraying a flicker of dread. Poirot took his place at the centre of the room, his small frame commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice steady and resonant, we are gathered to resolve the tragedy that struck this house. Dr. Maurice Langston was poisoned with cyanide, a death both swift and deliberate, administered in a raspberry tart before our very eyes. The question is not only who, but why. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly, and now the truth is clear. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Poirot's eyes swept over the group, lingering on Grayson. Let us reconstruct the night. The tarts were served by Monsieur Grayson, placed before each guest. Only Dr. Langston's was poisoned, The cyanide from a vial stolen from his own office. The precision? It suggests one who knew the victim's habits, who moved unseen among us. Lady Beatrice, your hospitality was impeccable, but you were distracted by your duties as hostess. Sir Reginald, your preoccupation with private matters kept your attention elsewhere. Miss Wentworth, your fear of Langston was great, but your hands trembled too much for such a deed. Mrs. Carver, your knowledge is vast, but you lacked the means. Mr. Bryce, your dispute was financial, yet you sat too far to act. He turned to Grayson, his gaze piercing. But you, Monsieur Grayson, you were the shadow in the room. You served the tarts. You had access to the kitchen, and you knew of Langston's cyanide prescription, and you had a motive, buried in the year 1909. Grayson's face twitched, his hands clenching at his sides. I've told you, sir, I had nothing to do with it, he said, his voice strained. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Permit me to continue. Through Inspector Japp's inquiries, I have learned of a tragedy in 1909. Your sister, Emily Grayson, died under Dr. Langston's care. The death was ruled accidental, but whispers persisted. A certificate signed too quickly, questions unanswered. Langston, I believe, held this over you, did he not? He blackmailed you, threatening to expose a secret that could ruin you. The room was deathly still. Lady Beatrice's hand froze on the figurine. Clara's breath caught, and Bryce's eyes narrowed. Grayson's composure began to crack, his shoulders sagging. You know nothing of my sister, he whispered, his voice raw. But I do, Poirot said softly, his tone almost compassionate. The letters in Langston's office, they were not only for others, one was addressed to you, demanding payment for silence about Emily's death. You served in this house when Langston treated her, did you not? You knew his methods, his greed. When he demanded more money, threatening to accuse you of complicity in her death, you could bear it no longer. Grayson's eyes glistened, and he sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. It was never meant to come to this, he said, his voice breaking. Emily was ill, fragile. Langston said he could save her, but she died, and he lied on the certificate, said it was natural causes. I knew it wasn't, but he threatened to say I'd neglected her, that I'd caused it. For years, he bled me dry. Small sums at first, then more. Last month he demanded $3,000. I couldn't pay. I couldn't let him destroy me. The confession hung in the air, heavy as the fog outside. Hastings stared, wide-eyed, while Lady Beatrice gasped softly. Sir Reginald's face was ashen, and Mrs. Carver's smile had vanished entirely. Bryce remained silent, his expression unreadable. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. So, you acted. You stole the cyanide from Langston's office, using your knowledge of his habits. You prepared the tart, slipping the poison into it as you served, knowing no one would suspect the butler. It was a plan most ingenious, but the little grey cells, they see all. Grayson looked up, his eyes hollow. I didn't mean to hurt anyone else, only him. He deserved it for what he did to Emily, to me. Inspector Japp, who had entered quietly during the confession, stepped forward, his notebook in hand. That's enough, Grayson. You're coming with me. He signalled to two constables, who gently but firmly escorted the butler from the room. As the guests dispersed, Lady Beatrice approached Poirot, her voice trembling. Monsieur Poirot, how can I thank you? This darkness in our house, you've brought it to light. Poirot bowed slightly. It is my duty, madame, to restore order where chaos reigns. Outside, as they walked through Mayfair's quiet streets, Hastings shook his head in wonder. You were right about Grayson, Poirot. But how did you know it was him, not Bryce or Clara? The motive, mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Bryce's anger was cold, financial. Clara's was born of fear, not action. But Grayson's was personal, a wound festering for years. The little grey cells, they saw the truth in his silence. The case was closed, the murderer unmasked, but Poirot's mind lingered on the fragility of human secrets, so easily turned to poison. Chapter 8. The order restored. The fog that had cloaked London for days had finally lifted, leaving the streets of Mayfair bathed in the crisp clarity of an autumn evening. The lamps along the pavements glowed softly, casting long shadows as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings strolled away from Darlington House, the echoes of Grayson's confession still resonating in their minds. The grand mansion, now quiet behind them, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves, and Hastings, hands in his pockets, glanced at his friend with a mix of awe and exasperation. "I say, Poirot, you've done it again," Hastings said, his voice tinged with admiration. "Grayson, of all people. I thought Bryce was our man, or perhaps Clara, with all that blackmail business. How did you know it was the butler?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, his moustache curving in a faint, satisfied smile. "Mon ami, it is always the little grey cells. They see what the eyes miss, the small details, the inconsistencies. Grayson was the shadow in the room, always present, yet unnoticed. His motive, it was not greed or ambition like Bryce's, nor fear like Clara's. It was a wound of the heart, a grief turned to vengeance. Such motives, Hastings, they leave a mark, visible only to those who look with method and order." Hastings shook his head, marvelling. "But the way you cornered him, bringing everyone together, laying it all out like a play. You knew he'd crack under the pressure." "Oui," Poirot replied, his cane tapping lightly on the pavement. "The guilty, they cannot resist the stage when the truth is near." Grayson's silence, his trembling hands, his eyes that could not meet mine. They spoke louder than words. The cyanide, the vial, the tart, all pointed to one who could move unseen, who knew Langston's habits intimately. And the secret of 1909, it was the key that unlocked his confession. They paused at a corner, the lights of a nearby pub spilling warmth into the dusk. Hastings frowned, still piecing it together. That 1909 business, Emily Grayson's death. Do you think Langston really falsified the certificate? Or was it just Grayson's belief that drove him to murder? Poirot's expression grew sombre. "The truth of 1909, it is perhaps lost to time, mon ami." Inspector Japp's inquiries found no definitive proof, only whispers of irregularity. But for Grayson, the belief was enough. Langston's blackmail, whether based on truth or lies, was the spark that ignited his rage. It is a tragedy, Hastings, when a man's grief becomes his crime. They resumed their walk, the city's hum a quiet backdrop to their conversation. At Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot's flat welcomed them with its familiar order, polished furniture, symmetrical cushions, and the faint aroma of a freshly brewed tisane. Poirot settled into his armchair, sipping the steaming herbal infusion, his eyes half closed in reflection. Hastings, too restless to sit, leaned against the mantel, his mind still on the case. "What about the others, Poirot?" he asked. "Sir Reginald, Clara, Mrs. Carver, Bryce. They all had secrets. Will they face any consequences?" Poirot set down his cup, his gaze steady. "They're secrets. They are not crimes, Hastings. Sir Reginald's personal matter, perhaps an indiscretion from his diplomatic days, remains his burden. Clara's broken engagement, it is a sorrow, not a sin. Mrs. Carver's gossip, it wounds but does not kill. And Bryce, his financial games are ruthless, but not murderous. The law, it punishes Grayson alone. But their consciences, they will carry the weight of this night." Hastings nodded, though his expression was troubled. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Langston wasn't exactly a saint, was he? Blackmailing Clara, Grayson, Maybe others. He brought it on himself in a way. Perhaps, Poirot said softly. But no man deserves such a death. The balance of justice, it is delicate. Langston's greed was his undoing, but Grayson's vengeance, it was a choice. The little grey cells, they seek not only the guilty, but the restoration of order. The clock on the mantel chimed, its gentle notes marking the passage of time. Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly in his lap. This case, Hastings, it reminds us of the fragility of human nature. Secrets, they fester. Truth, it heals. And I, Hercule Poirot, am its servant. Hastings grinned, the tension easing from his shoulders. You're a marvel, Poirot. I don't know how you do it, but I'm dashed glad you're on our side. Poirot's smile was modest, but his eyes gleamed with quiet pride. It is not I, mon ami, but the method. Order and method always. Now let us enjoy this evening, for tomorrow another puzzle may await. As Hastings settled into a chair, the warmth of the flat enveloped them, a haven of calm after the storm of murder. Outside, London carried on, its secrets tucked away in the shadows, but within these walls, order had been restored. The Darlington case would fade from the public's memory, a brief scandal in the society pages, but for Hercule Poirot, it was another triumph of the mind, a testament to the power of his little grey cells.